This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. To give you an idea who's on the call today, we have a mixture of customers and other certification organizations who have expressed an interest in learning a little bit more about our continuing professional development module. Just some context of Armature, if you don't know us. Armature has been in the certification and accreditation communities exclusively for the last 20 years. Around 10 years ago, we developed an out-of-the-box product, the first incarnation of that, which is called ARMATURE Fabric. And we've been committed through inputs from our customers and the industry to making new enhancements to ARMATURE Fabric, to adding new functionality, and that's just part of our, if you like, excuse the pun, the fabric of our culture. So today we're going to talk to you about the introduction of our CPD module, which is our latest development, and we're excited to walk you through that. So our goal today is really just to give you an overview of those capabilities, take any questions you might have, get some feedback from you, and define any next steps as applicable. We will have a Q&A session, and we invite you to use the chat functionality to ask any questions you might have. And then we'll also give you the opportunity to ask questions directly on the audio line following the demo. So with that said, I'm going to transition you over to Rohan Gupta to take you through the demo. Rohan.
Thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon, everyone. But before we get into the demo itself, I wanted to discuss our approach and goal of including CPD as part of Fabric. We wanted to make it straightforward to set up, easy to use for staff and end users, and generally provide better visibility and access to everyone involved in managing CPD and continuing education-related activities. As with all of our modules of ARMATURE Fabric, we wanted to maximize configurability so that your staff have control and don't need to rely on Armature staff or technical resources to make changes. As a quick overview, I'm going to start with the certified individual or end user. From there, I'll show the staff user perspective, and then finally, I'll show you an administrator's perspective and how you'd actually set up a training pathway and its associated tracks. I'm going to be using some very specific terminology today, which I wanted to give you an overview of. Training pathways were designed to be flexible enough to accommodate multiple tracks. Each track is made up of categories that define the credit requirements needed for actually completing that track. And categories are made up of specific activities that can be submitted by end users. For this demo, I've created a training pathway called Armature Certified Configurator. A certified configurator is an individual who is trained to configure the different modules offered through Armature Fabric. So let's start with the end user or certified individual. When we log in, we'll see a dashboard widget that'll show us our current active or qualifying credits. We'll also see the remaining credits needed for the current period and any that are expiring soon. From there, we'll take a look at in more detail at what activities have been submitted so far, and we'll also be able to submit additional activities as well. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to our system here. Now, one note I want to make before I start talking about CPD specifically is that we're using a full implementation of Armature Fabric here. So there's you'll see a lot of widgets on the screen. You'll see a lot of tabs across the top. This represents obviously the breadth of Armature Fabric. I'm going to be focusing specifically on CPD today. So just wanted to give you a heads up that you will see some other things on the screen here. Just as kind of a heads up here. So on the left, you'll see under CPD information, you'll see the track, and this specific track that we're going through currently. And by the way, this is my personal profile. So the track that I am currently going through is Certified Configurator Proficiency Level 1. Just under that, you'll see 20 total credits are required, so 5 from education. Now, these are the categories that I mentioned earlier, so 5 from education and 15 from hands-on training. We have a kind of a visual indicator here that shows I've currently completed 9 of my 20 total credits that I'm responsible for. So that means I have 11 remaining, and you'll see an indicator here as well. You'll also be able to see any credits that are going to be expiring soon. Now, there's a couple of ways to get into and to look at, in a little bit more detail what activities have already been submitted and to be able to submit additional activities. You can enter it through this link here, and there's a few other links available, but I'm just going to go ahead and click on this one here. So this gives me a little bit more detail as to what we're looking at. So under the certified configurator pathway, I'm currently on the track for proficiency level 1. I've achieved 9 of 20 as we looked at before, but now we get a little bit more detail, which says I've completed 4 of the 5 that I'm responsible for education, and 5 of the 15 that I'm responsible for hands-on training. On the right, we'll see specific activities that I have submitted so far. And if I click on one of these links, it'll actually give me a little bit more information about what I've submitted and how many hours or how many credits I've submitted so far. I can also see any description or notes, maybe a program agenda or something along those lines, along with any document evidence that I've uploaded. If I want to add a new activity, I'm given the opportunity to choose which category I'm adding an activity for. So in this case, I'll choose hands-on training. And from here, I can actually select the individual activity itself. In this case, we're looking at configuration for a client and configuration for a sales demo. If I click on configuration for a client, you'll see it says 2 total credits here, which is grayed out. We have a couple of different configuration options available to you. So in this case, we're using what we call the preset configuration option, which means regardless of what of how many hours or anything like that, when I submit this activity, it'll have a default value of credits associated with it. In contrast, if I were to choose configuration for sales demo, I can see that the total number of credits. I can actually select whichever number of credits I want here. Obviously, we put some limits in place, but this would be the user-defined type of configuration option where the user can actually specify how many credits they're submitting. I can add a completion date here, any description or notes, and I can even upload documents here as well to show that maybe I have a certificate from completing that particular training course or something along those lines. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to, so now that we've looked at from an end user perspective, we've seen the overview of how many credits I've submitted so far. We've seen, in a little bit more detail, and also being able to add activity. I want to switch over to what a staff user would potentially see. So I'm going to go back to our presentation really quickly. So from a staff standpoint, what I'm going to walk you through is it's going to be a very similar view to what we just saw from an end user perspective, where we'll be able to see how many active or qualifying credits an individual has submitted so far. We'll also be able to see additional details. We can even add activities ourselves if we'd like on behalf of that individual. But we'll also be able to see how we potentially can add that individual to additional pathways or tracks. And we'll talk a little bit about how we actually assign these tracks to an individual, or how they're actually automatically assigned to individuals. I'll walk you through a little bit around that. We'll take a look at training courses. This is actually outside of the context of CPD or outside of the scope of CPD, but you can track training history for non-CPD related training activity. So I'll walk us through a little bit around that. And then finally, we have what we call a training manifest, which basically is an overview of all of the individuals who are going through a specific pathway or track. And it'll give you options to filter and a few other kind of broader view of the individuals who are going through any of these tracks. So I'm going to switch back over to our system, and I'm going to start on the individual's profile. So what I've done is I've navigated to my specific profile, again, from a staff perspective, and I've clicked on the training tab at the very top. On the left, you'll see, again, a breakdown of how many education credits, how many hands-on training credits I have achieved so far. If I actually click on this link, it'll give me the same level of detail that the end user was able to see, with the same options to dig into the individual activities in a little bit more detail, and also to add activities here as well using the same sort of form that we filled out earlier. Underneath that, you'll see invitations. So I talked a little bit about how an individual would actually get assigned or would be required to go through a specific track or pathway or training pathway. We have basically the individual would be added to a group. So under setup and under security, we have the concept of groups in our system. Once you are actually included, or once the individual is included as part of a group, and I've created a group called Armature Certified Configurator. Once I added myself to that group, or once an end user is added to that group, this will automatically appear on their My Items dashboard. So there's no additional steps that you need to take. If it is required for anyone within that group, which is something that you can specify as you're configuring your process, then you'll be able to, it will automatically appear for the individual. We also have the ability to just make it available. So if it's not required, you can make it non-mandatory, but make it an option for that individual to actually go through a particular track or pathway. I can also, as a staff person, I can invite an individual to be part of another track. So in this case, I've selected the pathway Armature Certified Configurator, and underneath that, I have the track Proficiency Level 2 as opposed to Proficiency Level 1. So I always, as a staff person, have a few more options to be able to include additional individuals or end users to be part of a specific track. On the right here, we'll see the non-CPD related activities. So if I click on, I've already submitted a webinar here just as kind of a training history. So I can capture all the same information that we captured before. I can also upload documents, but keep in mind that this is non-CPD related and will not necessarily count towards credits. If you'd like to have this count towards credits, you do need to submit an activity specifically. So from here, I'd also like to show you, this is kind of the individual's view. So looking at an individual's profile, again, in this case, it's my profile, looking at what I've submitted so far. So the next thing I want to show you is our training manifest. And this is really kind of an overview of everybody who's going through, and you can look at the specific pathways that an individual is going through. You can see what status they're currently in. Have they completed their current cycle of submitting the correct number of credits, or is it currently under incomplete? And here you'll see there's a number that are currently listed as incomplete. I also have the ability here to filter. So if I only want to look at a specific pathway, I can filter this list down. So if I just click on one of these, I can easily filter this down, and I can also filter by status as well. So show me all of the expired in the system, or show me all of the incomplete in the system, as an example. And one more neat thing that we allow for is the ability to actually export this list, and we realize that this list can get quite extensive. We also allow the opportunity to export this into a CSV file. So if you'd like to further manipulate the data, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at both the end user and staff perspective, the last thing I want to walk us through is from the perspective of an administrator, actually setting up a pathway, setting up tracks, setting up categories, and as I mentioned, categories will determine the track's requirements, and then finally setting up activities. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to our system here. Okay, so the first thing we would do as an administrator would be to include or add a new pathway. Here you can add the pathway name. You'll see you have the ability to add a track name here as well. So in the example that we're going to look at, it's Armature Certified Configurator. The track name would be, say, Proficiency Level 1. The effective activity period describes when you add an activity, how long that activity stays active in the system. So how long it contributes to the individual's achievement of the requirements laid out by that specific track. On the right here, we talked a little bit about, how an individual would potentially be assigned this specific track. And here you'll see we have the ability to actually search through groups. So as I mentioned before, I've actually created a group called Armature Certified Configurator, and I, as a user, have been added to that specific group. Because it's required, it will show up in my dashboard automatically. So there's nothing else I need to do. Once I'm assigned to that group, it will show up. I also have the ability to make this just available, as I mentioned before, which makes it non-mandatory. And I can have as many tracks as I'd like. So as you'll see in just a moment, and in this example of Armature Certified Configurator, I actually do have a level 2 as a separate track here. I'm actually going to use Certified Configurator Proficiency Level 1 as our example for this demo. So I'm going to click on that specific track. Now here we have an overview of specific categories and their related requirements. We have an overview of the groups that this particular track can be assigned to, or excuse me, so the groups that would be participating as part of this track. And then we also have an overview of the activities that have specifically been set up in order to achieve, meeting these requirements for these specific categories. So what I'm going to look at really quickly is adding a new category. Here we can add a name, and we can also add the number of required credits that are necessary to complete this particular category. That in this case, it would be hands-on training and education. And under each of those, under hands-on training and education, we've added specific activities. So you'll see a credit type here. These are, as I mentioned before, how basically credits are calculated based on the type of activity that's submitted. So if I want to add, and under hands-on training, I've got configuration for client or configuration for sales demo as examples. I'm going to go ahead and just add a new one here to show you what the form looks like. So I can add additional activities. I can name this whatever I like. This could be an additional type of configuration for a specific use case. Here we have credit type, and this is what we talked about before. So under preset, as an example, what this basically says is this will default to a specific value. So say when you submit this type of activity, the default value could be 2 credits. So anytime I submit this, I will automatically earn 2 credits as part of as part of completing this activity. Another option I have is user specified, which we also talked about before. So the user can actually specify the number of credits that they're earning as part of submitting this activity. You can have a default credit value available. You can also have a maximum number of credits. So you can put some caps in place to make sure that an excessive number of credits are not being submitted at any given time. Finally, we also have a per unit option. So we can specify the unit type currently as hours or courses. Say it's hours. What we're basically saying is for every hour that's submitted, we can allow for, let's say, 2 credits to be included as part of this. So if the user submits 2 hours for this activity type, they will be credited 4 credits because we've included 2 credits per unit type. Yeah, again, you can specify maximum numbers of credits that are available through this means. So that is always an option. You can limit for any time you're submitting this specific activity, how many credits can be earned on a per activity basis. A few other options you have available to you. So we mentioned the default expiration date for an activity as being 12 months is what we had it set to. You can always override that on a per activity basis. So as you're setting this up, if 12 months, is too little or too long in terms of amount of time that you'd like for expiration, you can always override that. In addition, you can also allow the user to override that expiration date as well. We have an option here for user supplied evidence. So as you're submitting, or as the end user is submitting evidence, or excuse me, submitting an activity, you can allow them to submit evidence as part of that form. So we can require evidence to be submitted, and we can also specify the types of evidence. So we can force a document upload as an example. This could be for certificates of completing a specific type of course as an example. We can also ask for a description or maybe even a URL. So we can certainly add URL links into the system and allow you to link to external sources to show that you've completed this particular activity, or for the end user to show that they've completed this particular activity. We can also make this just available, so we don't necessarily have to make this required. So that concludes everything I wanted to go through from a demonstration standpoint. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our CEO to talk a little bit about the future of CPD, what areas we plan to make improvements on. So Dave, I could turn it over to you.
Yep, thanks Rohan for the demo. So for everybody on the call, as with all things Armature Fabric, when we look at the development of a product module, a product feature, obviously we're always looking at our current releases and what we're providing. But in this case, as with all others, we're also looking 6, 12, 18 months into the future. And given our commitment to accreditation, certification, credentialing, we see CPD and the expansion of the capability of CPD is one of our core areas where, given what's shown today, we'll continue to build upon. So I wanted to give you all a little bit of idea of phase 2, phase 3. Realistically, over the next 18 months, we'll probably talk about 4 to 5 phases. But phase 2 is basically coming from feedback that we've already gotten from customers and bringing this to them, going through the use cases, getting some configuration so we know the things that are most important to look at next. So phase 2 should be considered pretty near-term development. And the first thing that we'll be adding is really a rules-based pathway achievement. And what I mean by that is for more complex scenarios where you have pathways with multiple tracks, and let's say you say, a user, in order to achieve the armature configurator path, can do 40 hours of this or 20 hours of something else and 3 hours of something else. So that idea of bringing in rules-based pathway achievement so that you have more flexibility to configure. And again, this goes back to that overall idea that we really want to keep down the amount that you have to depend upon us. We're always here for you, but certainly we would like you to be able to roll this out and maintain it on your own without any kind of additional support from us. The next thing that has come up multiple times is extending third-party integration. For those who are already using our system, you know we have a API, but we really want to focus in on LMS connections and other provider connections with training. People like Prometric, so that if this data already exists, we're not actually forcing end users to enter it. We know from our experience in software and our interactions with our customers that certainly if they don't have to re-enter data, we would like to keep that to a minimum. And then the last two, really, executive dashboards to track participation revenue. One of our main goals is to be able to capture this information and then visualize it for senior stakeholders so it really becomes a good decision-making tool. Not only to understand how many people are participating, how many people are complete and compliant, but also to look at areas of opportunity where you can expand upon your current program and potentially reach additional people, additional sources of revenue. And obviously the last one is increased intelligence for notifications. One of the trickiest things about things like CPD is you have a very large constituent set potentially, and if you send too many notifications, people tend to ignore them. So one of the things we really want to focus on is how can we notify them in very discrete, pithy ways so that they will come back into the system and be compelled to update their own records without bothering them and without putting them into the basically into the spam folder where they just stop listening to the CPD notifications because there's too many. So those really 4 things are our immediate term focus. And then our phase 3 is really more about making it easier for folks to enter and manage where they are. So the first and foremost is mobile application for participants. And here we're talking about a very specific phone application, which is not encompassing all the features of Armature Fabric, but is really leveraging just the ability for an individual participant to go and easily update their credits. So if somebody's on the job, they want to get their record current, it's the most low effort activity that they could possibly do. And then the other two are CPD registry, where we have customers that have a correlation between different credentials, between different activities. We would like to be able to provide a common registry where they can pull from and actually benefit from shared information. And then again, the last one is cross-discipline analytics and dashboards. So this idea of when somebody is credentialed by multiple customers in certification, accreditation, that we can bring together the analytical side, the dashboard side, to really give information and make your lives a whole lot easier. So you all aren't tracking down and chasing down participants or chasing down this information. It's available to you, and it's available to you in an easy to use and easy to read format. So that really encompasses phase 2 and phase 3 for us. These will be pretty agile in terms of getting customer feedback as we bring more and more people onto this system. We definitely want to listen to our customer base and be able to take the feedback of folks who are using this and folks who want to use this and bring it directly into our product cycle. So again, phase 2, phase 3, exciting times ahead as we talk about CPD. And with that, I will turn it back to Andrew.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Rohan, for that. So let's move into the Q&A section. If you have a question, you're very welcome to ask it either on chat or if you would like to ask it on the phone, please state your name and your organization and ask your question and we'll get it answered. While we're waiting for you to gather your thoughts, we have had a couple of questions in. The first one is regarding SSO, an API, and is that available for data transfer from my membership platform? That's from Mary, who unfortunately had to leave. Dave, can I give that one to you?
Yep, absolutely. So as is our common answer, so we support SSO integration using two of the most known standards. One is called SAML and one is called OAuth, which is probably about 90% of the SSOs in use. So if that's available, then absolutely we can do that out of the box. If that's not available and it's a custom SSO, then certainly we have the wiring and capability to make that happen as well. It's just a little bit heavier lift.
Great, thank you, Dave. Next question is from Daniel Mendelson. Thank you, Daniel. Question is very simply, when will this be available? Yuki, can you address that one?
Yes, it is available now. This is already published and in our platform. If you want to know more about the next step, please contact Rohan. He will be able to kind of do a project plan and kind of point you to the next step.
Yuki, just as a follow-on, for existing customers, will they need to take an upgrade to access this functionality?
Yes, we will need to take an upgrade.
Okay.
And please communicate with your project manager in terms of your interest in using this, so we can make sure that this is enabled in your platform.
Okay, great. Any other questions at this point? Okay, there's one more question that has been asked of us over the last couple of weeks as we've been talking with customers, and that's really around, can I migrate data from either my existing spreadsheets that I use to track this or other systems that I use to track this? Can I migrate that data into this CPD module? Dave, could you address that one?
Yeah, sure. And so I think there's two answers to that, and probably that leads to one of our items that will be a phase 2 item for us, which is, we've seen this request a lot, which is to be able to have a standardized Excel format or CSV format where we can import data. So yes, we will definitely be looking to embrace that. And again, the other item that's on roadmap for us is to really embrace, again, these third-party systems. You know, the more used they are, the more likely we are to create out-of-the-box integrations. So for folks who are asking that question, I would say, please participate with us. Let us know what systems you're using, where that data wants to come from. It's the best way to get a feature for free. Is we can pull that into product roadmap, bring it together with a couple of other customers and do that. But we definitely want to look at what are the main LMSs or what are the main testing centers, or even in some cases, electronic medical record systems that already have this information so we can bring it in. So the more contribution, the more likely we are to be able to get some very robust feature to bring that data in from third-party systems.
Thanks, Dave. Any other questions? Okay. Rohan, if you wouldn't mind rolling on to the next slide. Next steps for us will be to make sure we get a good copy of the recording and distribute this along with the slides to you all. If you have any follow-up questions, please contact Rohan. Rohan's email address and phone number are on the slide there, and again, we'll be sending the slides out. But in the meantime, we very much thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a extremely safe and healthy holiday season, and we look forward to talking with you all soon. Thank you all very much.